which perceptions are most likely to hold Gen Z back, and what proactive steps can they take to address or reframe them for greater workplace impact? I'm going to scroll up to just let you take a look at can't handle feedback, no professional communication, phone dependent, needs constant validation, job hops under pressure, too easily offended, skips dues, paying, brings parents to their interviews, tech savvy but incompetent with people, only works for causes that they believe in, the L word, lazy.
Yeah.
I wrote doesn't want to pay dues twice. I don't know if that's just happened to slip in there. Work-life balance obsessed, entitled too early, lacks resilience, and over-dependent on validation. So what I thought was,
good ones there.
it's you one. I'm going to put it back up. So
there's so many good ones in there.
I know.
So this is what Gen Z needs to let go about themselves.
Well, this is the stereotypes that people have of Gen Z. And I don't want to make it a complaint session by any means.
Yeah.
I want to look at the focus of they have to deal with how everyone else sees them. Let's just say, because they view us, and I will say us, anyone who's non-Gen Z, say you're a millennial included, X and boomers, fine. They view us and they have their stereotypes. These are some of the common ones. So I'm trying to figure out which perceptions most limit Gen Z's opportunities to success or growth. And then if we take a closer look of the perceptions that you might pick, one or two or three, which one would you encourage Gen Z to focus on first? And what makes this area where they have the greatest ability to create positive change in their future opportunities, relationships, or career? So I'm going to go back to it. So if we can look at what makes this area where they have the greatest ability to create positive change. So let's just take a look at, can they control any of these? Can they make a positive change from any of these?
I think what we're starting to see as some of the phone dependence is what they're already working on changing. I think you see a lot of Gen Z starting to put phones down and finding things that connect. There's a resurgence in records and record players, in people going back to the movies, and people going back to church, especially like Gen Z going to church, because they're trying to find ways to put the phone down and connect with people. So I would say that's the one they're currently in. That's where they are right now of that list. That's what they're actively doing. I think that's where they are active today. I don't know. I think one of the misconceptions is too easily offended, because I don't think that they are. I think we just communicate completely differently. So they aren't so much offended. I also wonder if offended more goes with millennials than Gen Z, because I think millennials
you see a distinction. Do you?
I see a distinction. I think millennials fit much more into I'm offended, where Gen Z and Gen X have that a little bit more roll off their back mentality versus a millennial. I hear, like coaching with clients, I hear offended a lot more among my millennial.
And just to make that distinction for listeners, those over 30, roughly.
Yeah, roughly. If somebody in their 30s to the very, very early, like 41, 42.
41, 42 is the older ones. Yes. No, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So
I like the way you put that. Yeah.
They are much more in the offended category.
I love the way you put that.
I think they would also fall more into the job hops under pressure. I think millennials are more in that group as well. Let's see.
Have you ever faced a moment that changed everything? A loss, a new path, or an awakening that forced you to rewrite your life? Pivot Point is a podcast that explores those stories. I'm Nik Michael. We'll dive into how pain can spark growth and how crisis leads to clarity. Subscribe to Pivot Point today. Welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. I'm Nik Michael. This episode is part of our ongoing series, The Gen Z Launch Gap, Navigating College, Career, and the Transition to Adulthood. Throughout this series, we've been exploring one of the defining pivot points facing families right now. The moment when preparation meets reality, the years spent getting young people ready for success are colliding with a world that looks very different from the one their parents entered. The rules have changed, the pathways have changed, and for many young adults, the distance between education and employment has become something no one fully anticipated. Parents are asking how to help without doing it for them. Young adults are asking how to find direction when everything feels uncertain at once. And employers are asking why this generation seems to approach work so differently from everyone who came before them. Today's guest is someone who can answer those questions far more than one direction. Joining me again is Erin Treacy, founder of Erin Treacy Coaching, executive coach, leadership consultant, and trusted advisor to leaders, teams, and organizations throughout Appalachia and beyond. Erin was with us earlier in this series for a conversation about burnout, leadership, and the hidden costs of performing at capacity for too long. What made that discussion so resonant was the way she moves between perspectives that rarely talk to each other. She understands executive leadership from the inside. She understands organizational culture from the employer's side. And for today's conversation, she brings something additional. She is also the parent of Gen Z young adults, which means she doesn't just theorize about this generation, she lives alongside them. Something Erin said in our previous conversation stayed with me. She observed that many members of Gen Z grew up watching the people around them bring work everywhere, on vacation, into evenings, through the weekend, and many of them made a quiet decision early on. I am not going to do that. What some employers read as laziness or lack of commitment may be something far more deliberate. A generation choosing consciously not to inherit the burnout they watched unfold around them. Today, we'll explore the workplace expectations gap between generations, the communication breakdowns that keep making it worse, and what it actually looks like to bridge them. We'll talk about flexibility, identity, career direction, and the conversations that both sides are having about each other instead of with each other. Because here's what I keep coming back to. The question may not be whether Gen Z needs to adapt. The more honest question might be what this moment is asking all of us to learn from each other, and whether we're willing to have that conversation. Erin, it is genuinely a pleasure to have you back. I am very excited to speak with you. Welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. Before we get into the tactics, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to start as far as what do you see standing out to you in the foreground and that you see as a pivot that's impacting families and Gen Z kids?
I think as the parent of Gen Z, but also the person who employs them, in my intersection, it's so much misunderstanding. There are two completely different ways of working, of thinking, of all of it. It's all of these misunderstandings in the words. And then we also don't want to take responsibility as the older generation of we kind of created a certain amount of this. And so it's our responsibility just as much to fix it. But we also have to watch ourselves because a lot of parents have overfixed for so long for their kids that it's also setting them up in a lot of different ways too.
I hear you. And I totally agree. I wanted to bring up when these young adults enter the workforce, they often encounter organizations that are still built around performance metrics, hierarchy, accountability, and immediate results. Do you think we're seeing a clash between two different models of development? The mentor model that they experienced in school and the manager model they often encounter at work? And if so, can both educators and employers learn from that?
Actually would pivot even more outside of that. I think they are not so used to a mentor model because a mentor gives a concept and they figure out how to adjust to that. So they've had some of that. They certainly aren't used to a manager model to a certain extent. The problem is they've been overly managed. So they don't know where that intersection of where does my critical thinking begin and I'm regurgitating the book that someone gave me, right? Like that's where those things go. And so they aren't quite sure what to do with a mentor, and they probably haven't had a ton of experience in a mentor. They might have had a professor in college that was the slightly more than just the teacher in the class, but that person that really taught them things outside of the class, that emotional IQ that we talk so often about, or the soft
Yeah.
skills we talk about, that they've given them some of those, but we've overly managed them. And so now they don't know where to step in because we haven't taught them that lesson. They should have gotten it 10 or 12. They're now having to get it 22 and
Yeah, 22.
26.
Yes. What are the most common mistakes? Oh, I appreciate what you just said. It makes so much sense. With regard to Gen Z, what are the most common mistakes when trying to choose a career path? And where does the thinking usually go wrong?
I think you see them venture two ways. I hear, and especially I have 5 kids, all Gen Z. And then so you're surrounded by them, you're surrounded by their friends. And then obviously you have all of your parents and, obviously clients that you work with are also parents. So you kind of
Yeah.
hear both sides. Their kid has either picked a career that is, I want to make the most money. And so that's the mindset because the world is far more expensive and they've learned to appreciate that. So they don't pick a career that they actually like. They pick where's the most money. And so they gear themselves to that. Or they're the kid who goes the other way and it's like, I just want to have fun. So I may have my degree, but I want the job that, is maybe 4 days a week, less responsibility, lets me hang out with my friends. And so they're kind of these two polar ends of that spectrum that we're seeing right now. Obviously there's always some in the middle, but that tends to be some of the steer. And when I hear my friends talking about what their kids, they wanted to go into education, but you'll never make any money as a teacher. So don't do that. You need to be, and then fill in the gap. And they're not going to have a life of any kind of satisfaction if we're solely picking for.
Yeah. See, I'm trying to work with parents to help them understand how it's important for their young Gen Z kids, even at the 17, 16, 15 age range, where they're in high school trying to pick the college. Then they're in college coming to me because there's a breakdown. There's a reaction to some of the stress, and they're not, whether they're aware or not, they're not used to being on their own. They're getting overwhelmed. There's a high level of anxiety and depression. Then they find they have obsessions and compulsions or any kind of addiction that's going on. And so then we're backtracking, trying to figure out, well, how do we salvage a college career and try to get them on track with it? Those that get through that are the ones then they're picking a major that really doesn't align, let's say, with what the parents' beliefs are. And as you know, we have a different perspective as far as making money, having a good career. Is the concept of a dream job helping this generation or working against them? Because they tend to want to go for purpose. I want a job that I have a purpose for. And
Gen
many,
Z is certainly a purpose driven. They want a connection. So they can be an accountant, but they can be an accountant at a nonprofit, right? Like, so and what I tell my clients and my own kids and people that I work with, stop trying to fit the dream job into, like, we need to flip the script. Instead of what do you want to be when you grow up? I
yeah,
always told my kids the way you should pick what you want to do is think of the thing you didn't have when you were growing up that you wish you did. Did you wish that you had, like, for one of my kids, she was in a situation where she really wanted to be into therapy, but she's very religious and very involved in her faith. And she says, I need somebody who can talk to me about both of those things in the same conversation. Where we live, there are a lot of religious, you could get it from the pastor or you could get it from therapy. You couldn't merge those two things.
yeah,
So for her, that's how she decided what that is. So you go back to that same thought, you can have a purpose. I want a purpose in my life. I want to help feed hungry people. And that is the passion project that I have. But my skill is an accountant. Okay, well, go be great at math, get a math degree, get a finance degree, learn how to write grants, and go work for those things.
I
So
love that
now
outlook.
we've taken the skill that we have and turned it into the passion that drives us. And
I,
that way, too, you're going to be one, highly in need, because who doesn't need a great grant writer right now and somebody to keep the books? AI is not going to replace those jobs in any kind of measurable way because AI can't tell the human story of things. If you've ever used AI, granted, it's starting to do a little bit more in accounting, but if the information is logged in wrong, AI can't pick that up. It doesn't know the difference. So we still need
Yes.
people in these jobs. We just have to start creating, what am I good at? And what was my purpose, or what is my passion? And then how do we backstep into both of those things?
The way you're looking at it, because my next question was, what is the difference between passion and aptitude, and which one should a young person actually be leading with early in their career?
I think when you're in college, you go with your aptitude. What am I
Okay,
good at?
this is important to hear. Good.
And do that. Again, using that accounting degree. I'm great at math. I am not great at math. I am horrible at math. I went to journalism school. Not going to go into a math field. It's not going to happen. But if that's your skill, if you are great at science, maybe you're a health science or a biology or a nursing or something in that area, you pick those fields. That's where you put your aptitude to get your degree. While you're in school, start working in the places or volunteering in the places that are your passion. If your passion is, I want to feed people, and I am a huge advocate for our local food bank and food pantries, so I will use that as often as I can. So if that's my passion, I will use my time to volunteer in those places, but also get to know the people who are doing the jobs that are part of my passion, right? I'm going to make friends with the finance team. I'm going to make friends with the development team. I'm going to make friends with, while I'm working through my aptitude, so that I'm already connecting my dots.
I just love the way you put that so clearly and concisely. It's just so well said, because you're saying the connection to your passion can be made, and you should go with your strength. What I tend to notice, kids tend to go with their strength. What the struggle for parents and kids ends up being is, I think we as parents see our kids having greater potential and may not look at them for what really they are, but we look at them for what they could be. We know where they are, which isn't a bad thing, because then we can see and track that progression. You can get there and you can do this. I think there's a clash that goes on between what we want for them and what they want for themselves. And I think this is the disconnect that's occurring. What skills do you believe are most valuable right now than any specific major or credential? What skills, actual skills?
I think they're the skills that are those soft skills. There's starting to be a lot more research of Gen Z and on amotivational syndrome, which is very Gen Z. It's one I've read a lot about recently, again, having some Gen Z kids, working with some folks. And one of the things that we get from that, these are kids who came up in COVID, who came up completely online in an all digital world. So there's a certain amount of their life that was disconnected, and those formative years that we learned some of those things. So they didn't get even more of, if you talk about a millennial or like a Gen X, we got some emotional intelligence over the years that was learned across the way. Gen Z missed all of those years. So being able to tie into regulating their emotion, into this job is not perfect. It doesn't do exactly what I want when I want. My manager doesn't love me. They don't give me a compliment and a pat on the back every day. They don't think I'm awesome. They fussed at me because I did something wrong. And so they don't have some of those emotional intelligence skills. So it's being able to manage some of those. You're not going to love your job every day. And I don't care who you are, you're not going to love your job every day. There are always the nitty gritty, boring parts of work that some days are the things that we do. So the skill that we need is those communication skills, is those self-regulation skills, is those, I need to ask for feedback. I need to ask for a mentor conversation, not a manager conversation. And to understand where those differences are, kind of tying back into those early questions that you asked, I need to know how to sit beside that boss and go, they told me these things and they were incredibly constructive about it as your manager because they're trying to improve you. But they didn't see that in a mentorship coaching way. They saw it as pick, 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 pick.
Yes, critical and judgmental maybe, and you're not good enough. Get this right, get back to me, compared to. So that aspect there, What I'm noticing in the last, and I've been in the school system for about 24 years now. Prior to that, I was in the hospital system. Prior to that, I was in the business field, in sales, as you know, and in marketing. What I notice now in the school system in the last 15 years, there's the approach of, let's say, the growth mindset. We're encouraging kids to make mistakes, learn from mistakes. Don't worry, you're learning still. It's great when you're in, until 7th and 8th grade, but then you're in a different place when you're in high school, in a much different place in college. And we're going to move you along. We're going to develop you. That kind of a model is being spoken about in some of the literature. And I'm getting the sense that this quiet type of quitting that goes on, or this avoidance of staying and sticking to a job, is somewhat tied into, well, I'm not getting the feedback I want. I'm not being encouraged. I'm being spoken down to. I'm not being respected. I'm somewhat being disrespected. And just because I'm 23 or 25 and I'm doing the same job as that guy who's 35 and that lady who's 40, and why shouldn't I get as much as them when I'm doing the same job just as good? So I think. So you've got this clash, yet those people have been and paid their dues. So this is there, and I'm not going to go into the other stereotypes. We can talk about that later. How do you put all that together when you have kids who you can see that that's loud and clear, that's coming through? They're used to a different type of model of being taught. Do you see that? And does that happen?
I 1,000%.
Yeah.
I see it. And that's, I think, where we're still trying to maybe figure out, what do we do? Because there's a crazy expectation. And it may go back to, you were talking about like that parent letting go a few minutes ago about, what the parent's expectation is and how that works. So as parents, when we look at our kid, we look at, little baby Sally, that we had this dream that she was going to be a famous actress or a doctor or whatever. And then it turns out Sally hates the stage and is terrible at science, but she's an amazing writer. And so, that's hard as a parent to make those adjustments. But in the same kind of way, we've umbrellaed, or we've shoved her into, no, you have to do this because that's what I want of you. But we've also kind of put a certain amount of over complimenting Sally over the years. And you see this, I saw this in like, active, maybe like travel sports and a lot of this. Well, if Bobby can't be on the starting lineup, we'll just quit and go to the other baseball team or the other soccer team or the other whatever team. Well, I've seen Bobby play, and I don't understand why Bobby's on the roster. But I get your dream is that Bobby is going to make it to the major leagues. I get you want that. I mean, what parent doesn't want their kid to be amazing at whatever it is? But that doesn't mean that they are. I will never forget, I had a really good friend, and when his kid was about 4 or 5 years old, he's standing there talking to me, and he's like, Erin, watch it. Watch him pitch. His 4-year-old. And he says, can't you see it? He's going to be a major league pitcher one day. And I was like, are you kidding me? He's 4. Well, so if Bobby's grown up his whole life with mom and dad over here saying, you're a major league pitcher, and there's no attachment to any real validation of anything that says that, then it's really hard when Bobby gets into a workforce to not have some self-awareness that maybe he's not the best thing at pitching, or maybe he does have more growth that needs to come. He may be an amazing pitcher, but like Kobe Bryant still had a coach in the championship. Michael Jordan talked often about Phil Jackson and having a coach in those games. So just because you are really good, so let's say Bobby's great at being a pitcher, he still needs a coach. He still has work and growth and development. The game is always changing. There's always ways to improve. Bobby may be absolutely terrible, but if he doesn't have any way to regulate that, again, it's something he did at 10 or 12. How do we ask Bobby to do that at 22?
I one of the things I appreciate about your approach and the work you do is that you don't speak in absolutes, but you seem to have a unique ability to see both sides of a situation at the same time, and that's become increasingly rare. And you break it down so well. I just want to compliment you about that, because whenever I hear you speak, it's just I'm right there with you. Your example was exactly like what we were thinking about, how I see my son as this way, or I see my daughter that way. I know she could do it. She's got to want it. There's a difference between interest and motivation. I'm interested in learning another language. I'm interested in learning Spanish for the last 35 years. I'm not motivated anymore. I don't need to learn it. If I need it, I might be motivated. If I'm going to China, I want to learn how to speak Chinese, perhaps. So if I'm going to France, I'm going to speak French. Great. There's a purpose for that. I think kids tend to change their purpose to suit their needs and their emotions rather than what they're really good at. And they're living in a different world or a bubble. And I think the parents are living with them in that bubble. And then there's a very big shock as they get older when they're not following that career path. So how would you say, how important is early failure in a career trajectory? And how do you help someone reframe failure when it happens? Because we're not going to avoid failure
There
or
isn't a
setback.
way. And
Yeah.
and that's one of those things, again, if we go back to, thinking about your role as the parent, you have to let your kids fall some days. And I don't mean like, jumping off the bridge into something crazy, but I mean they have to fall down sometimes. You didn't get where you are, to whoever is listening and watching, and that you've never not fallen. But what we learn when we're a kid is we learn how to get back up. We need mom or dad and uncles and grandparents and teachers and neighbors and all of those people that kind of pick us up and brush us off so that we learn that we can. The world didn't end. I fell off my bike. I got up. I put a band-aid on and I went and did it again. Right. Like, I mean, and you go, okay, cool. If I could do it, at 6 and 12 and 15, you're falling off the bike looks different at 22 and 32 and 42,
Yes.
and they'll be different again at 52. But because you've seen it, you go, oh, I can get up. I can, you know, I grew up a competitive skier. If I fell on a training run, I may be sore, but the one rule in my brain that was just part of being A, highly competitive, and B, having my dad's voice in my head. Again,
Yes. Yeah.
you start talking about how that works. Dad, is you do it one more. You get up, you show the mountain that you won, you go up, you do the training run again, you make it to the bottom. You're like, see, I did it. Now I'm going to go inside and ice my hip from where I fell the run before that. Right. And that's okay. But you need that for yourself to go, okay, the mountain will not beat me today. I say that type of stuff to my kids all the time when they're doing something, like, go back and do it again, because the mountain's not going to win. We're not going to let whatever that thing is, the mountain won't win. Now, we broke a leg. We're not going to go back up, but we're going to go back on that mountain as soon as the leg is healed. But again, it just starts to teach you that it's much more of a mental game than it is a physical game. So mentally, I'm going to win this. And however I do that. And then the same thing, as you get older, you start to go, okay, my boss fussed at me. Was there something accurate in that? Is there something I need to learn? What is my takeaway? I'm still the person who, when somebody kind of gives me that pushback, I fully accept it, but I'm going to go, now I'm going to show them how much better it can be, because I have to show you that I'm not better than somebody else, but I'm better than that critique. Yes, you're right. I can do that better. And now I'm going to do it and say thank you for showing me that I could do better. You need the push. You need it.
You're listening to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. If today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It truly helps others find the show and supports the work we're doing here. You can find Pivot Point Strategy for Change on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like a deeper dive into the work we explore on the show, I invite you to visit my Substack page, where I share in-depth articles and reflections. Which I so much appreciate that. What strikes me every time we speak is how practical your wisdom is. And you just take concepts that become emotionally charged and turn them into conversations that people can have. And I from what I recall, I mean, you're about 37 like I am, right? That's what I remember the last time we spoke. So
totally.
are Gen Z's expectations about work life and their balance of work life realistic in the entry-level roles? And how do you address that when coaching without knocking them over and blowing them out of the water is what I mean.
I think they are incredibly wise in their expectation of some. I don't think we're there yet.
Okay.
So this is part of the conversation. You switch back to the leadership and the business and the management. One of the things that Gen Z learned from the mom and stepmom of 5, so there's 5 in our blended, what they learned from my overworking and my own burnout and watching it, my kids worked in my restaurants. So they saw what I did all day, and a lot of kids don't get to see what their parents do all day. Mine did. So they saw what I did all day, and all day wasn't 9 to 5. All day was 7:30 to midnight. Right? They saw inside the business, but they also saw how much work got done at 10 and 12 o'clock at night after I got home after the restaurant closed. So they saw both sides of it. They saw that I was making dinner and I was home for dinner, but I wasn't actually present. They saw that I was at their soccer game or at their whatever, but I wasn't actually present. I'm on my phone, or can you stop talking? I know you're talking, but I've got my smartwatch telling me that my Facebook notifications and my Instagram notifications and all the other notifications on our stupid smartwatches. I have not worn a smartwatch in years because it takes us away. And that's what our kids have learned from us. They turn off notifications all the time so that only the truly important ones come through. They don't want to be disengaged because they felt that all of those years. They saw the overwork. They're like, you know what? I'd much rather have a teeny tiny apartment and enjoy vacation and dinner with my friends than 70 hours of work. Like, that just doesn't make sense. And in a world of technology, why do I need to? And so they learned that from us. They've taken that away, all of those things, and then we're mad at them because they learned that from us. Industry hasn't caught up. And I think that's the message right now. If you can find that job, that expectation is great. If you want to lay that expectation out or see if there's something possible with a job that you're having a conversation with, I wouldn't do it in like the first interview. Because again, if that business isn't ready to make some of those changes, you come off to them as lazy or not part of the team or all of those labels and tags that get put on Gen Z that aren't completely fair. But if that's the question you're asking in the interview, so I can work at home 2 or 3 days a week and by Zoom, that's what they're going to take away from it. Oh, they don't want to be here. Not part of the team. They don't want to be in the culture. So that's not the question in interview 1. I'm not sure that it's the question in the interview at all. First, you need to maybe get your foot in the door, see what the place is about, and then maybe start having the conversation on the backside and understand the world is changing. We'll see how long it takes to kind of get there.
I want to pull something up on the screen for you if you want to give me your take on this. So I'm looking at Gen Z stereotypes and I'm trying to look at what they are and their perceptions and how they shape opportunities. So whether fair or unfair perceptions matter. These are their perceptions. Yeah. So which perceptions are most likely to hold Gen Z back, and what proactive steps can they take to address or reframe them for greater workplace impact? I'm going to scroll up to just let you take a look at can't handle feedback, no professional communication, phone dependent, needs constant validation, job hops under pressure, too easily offended, skips dues, paying, brings parents to their interviews, tech savvy but incompetent with people, only works for causes that they believe in, the L word, lazy.
Yeah.
I wrote doesn't want to pay dues twice. I don't know if that's just happened to slip in there. Work-life balance obsessed, entitled too early, lacks resilience, and over-dependent on validation. So what I thought was...
good ones there.
It's you one. I'm going to put it back up. So
there's so many good ones in there.
I know.
So this is what Gen Z needs to let go about themselves.
Well, this is the stereotypes that people have of Gen Z. And I don't want to make it a complaint session by any means. Yeah. I want to look at the focus of they have to deal with how everyone else sees them. Let's just say, because they view us, and I will say us, anyone who's non-Gen Z, say you're a millennial included, X and boomers, fine. They view us and they have their stereotypes. These are some of the common ones. So I'm trying to figure out which perceptions most limit Gen Z's opportunities to success or growth. And then if we take a closer look of the perceptions that you might pick, 1 or 2 or 3, which one would you encourage Gen Z to focus on first? And what makes this area where they have the greatest ability to create positive change in their future opportunities, relationships, or career? So I'm going to go back to it. So if we can look at what makes this area where they have the greatest ability to create positive change. So let's just take a look at, can they control any of these? Can they make a positive change from any of these?
I think what we're starting to see as some of the phone dependence is what they're already working on changing. I think you
Okay.
see a lot of Gen Z starting to put phones down and finding things that connect. There's a resurgence in records and record players, in people going back to the movies, and people going back to church, especially like Gen Z going to church, because they're trying to find ways to put the phone down and connect with people. So I would say that's the one they're currently in. That's where they are right now of that list. That's what they're
Right.
actively doing.
I'm trying to put myself on the screen at the same time. I just wanted to figure that out. Yeah.
I think that's where they are active today. I don't know. I think one of the misconceptions is too easily offended, because I don't think that they are. I think we just communicate completely differently. So they aren't so much offended. I also wonder if offended more goes with millennials than Gen Z, because I think millennials
You see a distinction, do you?
I see a distinction. I think millennials fit much more into I'm offended, where Gen Z and Gen X have that a little bit more roll off their back mentality versus a millennial. I hear, well, like coaching with clients, I hear offended a lot more among my millennial.
And just to make that distinction for listeners, those over 30, roughly.
Yeah, roughly. If somebody in their 30s to the very, very early, like 41, 42.
41, 42 is the older ones. Yes. No, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So
I like the way you put that. Yeah.
They are much more in the offended category.
I love the way you put that.
I think they would also fall more into the job hops under pressure. I think millennials are more in that group as well. Let's see. I think Gen Z gets so labeled as lazy. And I think it's that amotivational syndrome. They've just kind of been put in a bubble for so long that now it comes off as lazy, because they don't have the critical thinking skills to reason their way out of wherever it is they are. And so that's kind of that one where growth probably needs to happen the most, because it gets, you hear that one a lot. I actually wrote a whole blog, Gen Z isn't lazy, and put.
I think I saw that blog. I think
you hear it just all the time.
Yeah. So we have, stereotypes about ourselves again. So we have to struggle with that. What's the deal with these older people? Fine. How do you shake that is what I'm trying to, because then I go back to, and I'll have clinicians on later on in the series, talking about how do we address that with families and with the kids themselves. You're addressing it in a very fine line with, you want to work. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your skill. Let's bring you to the next level. I have a college advisor talking about, okay, great. Whether or not you're going to college or not, let's talk about your future. So you're in high school now. Let's talk about the future. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. And later on today, and again, I have a series with recruiters, both on both ends, where they're the in between, where the employers and they're trying to get people hired. They see what's going on, and I think families are not aware, and the young people are not, of the major shift that's going on here. Putting aside all the AI and the rest of the stuff that's going on, because our experience when we were growing up and finishing college and moving on, whether or not we went to graduate or not, you made decisions differently, and whatever we went through is really not the same. And so I think that's the values that older people have, and on their own, they're just transferring and throwing that out there. So I appreciate let me go right back to that if it works for you. So what is one practical action that Gen Z can take to challenge or overcome this perception? If you want to pick one of them that you think is, most in the forefront.
I think just because they're already working kind of on that segregating themselves from their phone, if we look at the lazy concept of that, so how do we start to focus on that? Is they start asking the questions for themselves. They're not having mommy call and ask the question. They're not asking someone else, but they're so propped up on mom and dad did a lot of this work. I am somebody who has had parents come to an interview with their Gen Z child. I've been the employer on that side, and I sort of get it.
That's my next question,
I sit and go, okay.
You,
But I
again, you,
also then go, I know a lot of parents, again, having kids this age, I know a lot of parents, and I'm like, I mean, I could probably name parents that I know who would totally do that for their kid. And I knew that not because, they ever said anything, but because they're talking about how they were doing Sally's homework 2 nights ago, right? So of course they did. If you're doing kids' homework and you're writing their papers and you're doing their stuff, and that's how they're getting through, high school and college, then yes, you're the parent who's going to show up. My favorite day, I love going to college orientation with all of my kids. And when the last one went to school, and most of them went to Marshall, which is also my alma mater, do I need to go to orientation? No. I go to hear the talk because I so enjoy looking around the room and watching the parents be dumbfounded when they're like, who in here thinks that you are allowed, when your student goes to college, that you are allowed to email professors and ask for grades? And when 79% of the room raise their hand, I crack up laughing.
oh my.
Because they do. That's their mentality. What do you mean I can't see their grades? What do you mean I can't write their paper for them? What do you mean that there are all these things? And all these parents are learning how to Blackboard. Being in a college parent Facebook group, hilarious. There's so much joy in it because you just go, wow, I totally get why we're here. But when you're sitting on the other side of that, you're like, yeah, Bobby really needed to figure out how to do this. But Bobby needed to learn how to do this before he was 22. So you go back to that when you're teaching your kids, and then how do you deal with it as a boss? So I don't care if you're 16 years old and a minor working for me. Employment law says you're the employee and I can't talk to somebody else about an employee. I don't care if that's your parent. A sentence that has come out of my mouth on more than one occasion, I don't care. Mom can't come to work with you. She can't come to the interview with you. I'm not paying her. And if you can't talk to me in an interview, how are you going to talk to my guest? And I usually direct those to mom because she's usually the one that needs to hear it, not the child. The child probably wanted to come to the interview without
I have to
her.
give you another compliment. Your manner is so respectful. You have a remarkable way of translating between worlds. You understand what leaders are experiencing, but you also understand what younger generations are trying to communicate, and you bridge that gap between the both, and you highlight the strengths, but you do it in a very respectful, amazing as far as handling those very sensitive kind of topics and bringing them together. So I'm going to go back to this, and
Yes.
you're going to tell us now, what should parents encourage, reinforce, or model to help support that growth?
Parents should encourage children to speak up for themselves. You are not their mouthpiece. They need to learn to do it. There are times as a parent, and I mean a parent of a child under the age of 18. If you're over the age of 18, there are points you may need to step in, but there are far fewer of them, right? That's when you start fussing at your child to speak up, not fussing. So yes, as a parent, there are places you need to step in. Is Sally Sue upset she's not getting enough time on the field of soccer? Maybe. I don't know. If that's how Sally feels, then Sally needs to go have a conversation with her coach. What is Sally not doing? And it's not a conversation of I'm mad. It's what am I not doing? What do I need to do? And how can I get where I want to be? Right? We need to teach our kids that. So that's what we need to be teaching them. That's what we need to be encouraging them to do. What we also need to do is be supportive. I get it's hard. I get, you feel like you aren't being treated fairly, but don't lean into it. You're right. You are being treated unfairly. How dare they? Blah, blah. And mom becomes the sounding board, or dad becomes that gossipy sounding board of the conversation. That's not the role of a parent. Let them have that conversation with their friends. Can you explain to me how you came to that? What's sticking out to you? Yes, you're right. I did notice that, or I didn't notice that. I'll watch for it, right? So we need to start moving to being the sounding board, but also the reflection. If you aren't, do they need the full length mirror at 15? Maybe not. It depends on the 15-year-old. Some kids at 15 can totally do like, here's the full length view, go whatever. Other kids need like the little handheld. Like it depends on your kid. But we need to slowly be putting the mirror up and not being the racquetball wall where it's just bouncing back and forth. And in that like social circle of it, we're the coach, we're the mentor. We need to start letting them see what that looks like as a parent. because now they can translate that when they go to work. There's, and start to see those differences. And so that would be one of the ones too. It's one of my kids moved out last week, my sophomore in college, and it was not the most fun, easy week. There were plenty of things that I was like, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think the place you picked to move is like the greatest place to live. But you know what? He has to learn that.
Yes,
He
yeah.
has to go
Yeah.
and figure it out. And is he going to die? No. Is my house terribly far away? No. Is he going to learn a lesson from this? But he
Yes.
needs that
Good.
lesson. He doesn't need me to fix it. He doesn't need me to go get him the fancy place. He needs to live in that squalor little place by campus, because we all know that squalor apartment or house that we lived in college. We all know it. You need it, right? Like you need to know what it is to kind of get down and go, look, I am dirt poor and I have to figure out how to get through. And so being able to be in those spaces, life can't be too cushy, but those things will help them grow. And then as somebody who also has had kids that are now, one turns 25 here, well, actually two turn 25 here in the next few weeks. And so, they are into adulting a little bit more, and a 27-year-old, and they go, oh, okay, it's kind of fun to be parents with them, because we can have a few more conversations. And when they call to ask me questions, they still get annoyed because they're like, my boss, da, 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 da. Okay, well, why did your boss do that? What did it sound like? What did it feel like? Okay, well, why do you think he might have said that to you? And like one of mine, she's a therapist too. So it really drives her nuts when I throw all of her therapy language back at her. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is so annoying. I know, isn't it? But it's so much fun for me. And she just laughs. Because I purposely use the therapy lines on her because she's a therapist. But,
You have such a way. The best coaches help people see things they couldn't see on their own. And the best leaders help people become more effective. You seem to do both simultaneously. I will tell you this much. So I gotta.
We'll do everything, right?
Yeah. How do you help someone who is waiting to feel confident before taking action? And what is the cost of that waiting? They're saying, I don't feel confident because I'm not there yet. Yeah. Will they ever be there unless they jump in? Right. That's
you will never be there. I mean, we're waiting to have a baby until we're ready. There's no such thing. We're waiting to make this change, or to effectively do this or effectively do that. I mean, what's wait going to do? Well, I'll worry about thinking about whatever this life crisis I have to figure out while I'm on vacation a month and a half from now. Well, why can't you think about it today? What can we today? We've taught and we've learned, and part of the I'm supposed to have this huge, great big plan of this perfect life, and then I'm just magically supposed to have it. And the reality is, each day we make a choice to work toward whatever that is. It's great to have a vision board, but we have to remember it's vision. And the thing, like I'll use myself as this example, the thing I wanted in my 20s had nothing to do with the things I wanted in my 30s, have nothing to do with my 40s, and then now moving closer and closer to my 50s. Like they change. All of them change, right? Like there were points where I had kids, so decisions were different. There were, so it's going to change. What you wanted at 20 isn't what you want to be at 55. And it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I'm really proud of in myself, and I can look back on and go, wait, I did go do that. I tried it. It was successful. It wasn't successful. I mean, but I tried it, and that was kind of cool. It may have lasted 5 minutes.
Well, you gave your best effort, and you gave it a go. So, and
so
you
I don't
came
have
with
to
an
look
open
back
mind.
And have that regret.
Yes,
That's going to be much more painful later on. But that's what we think. We need to put it off until we have the whole plan, until the whole picture is painted. Well, you don't open a puzzle box and it's put together.
You see, every time I speak with you, I'm reminded that effective leadership isn't really about managing people. It's about understanding people. And that understanding is something you model exceptionally well. I just want to emphasize that. Your clients are very fortunate to work with you. I want to tell you this much, because you come from both sides of the table, and your skills in validating and supporting and encouraging and gently, it's just your tone, your manner, everything. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. It's very therapeutic, and and it's very natural for you because you've been exposed to being with people. So what does success look like at 25 today? And how far off are most parents in their picture of what it should look?
So from the 25-year-old,
Yeah. A little older, right? We're done with college. We have a couple of years out.
25, 26, 20. So the ages of
Yes.
my older children, I
Older
think for
ones. Yes.
them, it's their independence is success for them. I think that's what they would probably, the feedback from all of them. They're, I have two almost 25s and a 27. And I think for them, success is they're independent, they're out on their own, they're paying their own bills, they're living the life and they're creating their life. I think they would say they're not fully living their life, they're fully creating their life. They're all in different areas of how well they're doing that, not how well, but at
Right.
which levels they're doing that. So, but I think that they're creating their life and having their own independence. And it's nobody else is telling them what to do. They're figuring those things out. For me as a parent of kids those ages, I worry about how are they managing their money? How are they the successes? Yes, they're all independent, but are they okay? Are they, in stress modes? Are they in, so as a parent of those groups, that's kind of the worry part of it. But they're all still growing. And I think that's the encouraging part as a parent too. They all have that understanding that, I don't have it all figured out. I don't have all the money in the world, but they're still asking questions.
Good.
And
No, I hear you.
so from the
Yeah.
parent side of it, that's what's important.
No, very well said. I want to pull up something because I'm asking this question to the different professionals as well. So the biggest internal barrier to launching has been identified as imposter syndrome, lack of assertiveness. Again, we're back to some of the stereotypes, being
Mhm.
judged before walking through the door. They're both physically safest generation and the most mentally fatigued, fragile.
Mhm.
Dr. Twin, when you see a young person struggling to launch, what do you think is actually going on inside of them? What's the barrier that's hardest to see from the outside?
I think it is that mental health imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
I think the world has changed so much in their life.
right.
When we're talking about Gen Z, we're a few years before 9/11. They probably most of them are too young to remember it, but maybe alive through kind of we're at the tail end
Yeah,
of them, in
yeah,
high
that's
school,
them.
middle schoolish right now. So when we're talking about Gen Z, you think about how many things have changed. They've lived through a lot, but they were too young to understand all
And
of those
process.
shifts.
Yeah,
Yeah, they couldn't process it. They knew it was changing. They knew something was different, but they didn't know what it was. And I think that's also where we see where they are. They know something should be happening, but they don't know what it is. It's like their maturism mechanism didn't kick in somewhere in that high schoolish, early college-ish because of all of those internal shifts. So it's catching them later.
yeah. No,
Um,
that's exactly what I thought. Yeah,
Yeah, I
what
think
I've
that's
seen.
probably very much so they don't even know how to start,
Hmm.
and that's what they're terrified of. They're like, "Well, what if I make the wrong first step? So if I don't
Yeah.
step." I ski raced with a guy, and he was notorious for falling, but not like little falls, but like huge blowouts on the
Mm.
mountain. And then he'd laugh and he went, "See, nobody beat me today." And he'd walk around with that
Uh,
badge, "Nobody
no,
beat me." And it's like he didn't win, but
he took
nobody beat
himself.
it,
He took
right? Like
himself
that
out of the race.
he took himself out of the race,
Yeah.
but he pounded his chest all day. "Look, nobody beat me. I'm the only
Uh,
undefeated person." And it
yeah.
was the badge of honor, but that's almost where Gen Z is. "Well, nobody beat me." Because they
Yeah.
didn't start. They took themselves out of the race
Yeah.
because that way nobody can beat them. They are so avoiding failure or the possibility of failure or the anticipation of failure that they've taken success off the
Yeah.
table.
And the other thing I see is the self-sabotage. What you're referring to is a form of self-sabotage.
Mhm.
Yeah. I have one more I want to pull up and we can
Yep.
take a look at how has technology shaped Gen Z? Because they are the first generation to go through puberty with essentially a portal in their pocket
Yep.
that takes them away from people nearby
All
and
the
into
time.
an alternative universe that was exciting, addictive, unstable, and unsuitable for children and adolescents. And that's John Haidt on the Anxious Generation. Gen Z has the highest engagement rate with generative AI tools of any generation in the workplace, and they are the most skeptical of AI simultaneously the most skeptical, AI's reliability and accuracy, the heaviest users, and the least trusting, according to a workforce report in 2024. So my question is, when you look at how technology has shaped what Gen Z expects from work and their own sense of value, where does that shape them well, and where does it work against them? I'll leave it up for a minute.
I would say where it works for them is that they are able to easily use the tools so that it's doing the background work for them. They know how to
Right.
talk to AI. They know how to use them in different ways. So the positive is they really are using their tools in some of their better spaces to take up
Right.
the mundane parts of work. I can't tell you how many of them I've seen have, like they have all the bots and they're like, yeah, this bot checks my email and hits and replies to them for me. A lot of that type of stuff. Where it has served to hurt them are those connections. They don't know how to take feedback, or I hate constructive criticism. I think it's so I like feedback better,
I
but
agree.
coaching either. But yeah, they're going to send you a text or an email long before they're never going to pick up the phone. They might come to your office. They're never going to pick up the phone. They will send you a text. They will send you an email, and they are Johnny on the spot to reply to it. It's like it's in their fingers, not just, I don't know how they do it. It's like their brain connects to the phone and somehow they do it so fast. I'm like, how did you even respond that fast? I didn't even read the sentence that quickly. So they can do that so quickly, but it is reactionary, right? Like it's, oh, here's what they said. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, would you please go back and read what I wrote? Because whatever it was didn't answer the question in the email, or didn't have so they won't read through the thread of emails to go, oh, wait, no, before I ask the question, I should search for it. So it makes them reactionary, which also disconnects them more.
Oh, well said. I'm so impressed with how you're putting it. This is so good. What you've given us today isn't just insight into a generation. It's a framework for how we talk to each other across the gaps that keep widening when we don't. The generational gap, the communication gap, the gap between what we assume and what's actually true. And what I find so valuable about the way you speak is that you're not speaking from one side of the table. You've sat in the employer's chair. You have children navigating exactly what we're describing. That combination, the professional clarity and the personal proximity, is rare. Most people in this conversation are advocating for one side. You're actually translating between them. And I think that's a big part of why your perspective resonates. I mean, you've made the case clearly. This isn't about Gen Z changing to fit a mold that was already breaking. It's about all of us being willing to update our assumptions, learn new language, and have the conversations we keep having about each other instead of with each other. And before we close, I want to say something directly. The work you're doing in this space really matters. You're helping employers understand a generation they've often been frustrated by, and you're helping young adults feel understood in the workplaces that are still trying to figure them out. So you're doing it with a combination of professional rigor and personal honesty that is genuinely hard to find. And the leaders, the families, and the organizations fortunate enough to work with you are getting more than just a coach. They're getting someone who's willing to help people find their way through a rapidly changing landscape. I'm so grateful that you came back to speak here on Pivot Point Strategy for Change, Erin.
Thank you so much.
I just, I can go on, and I look forward. I want to have you back when we take to the next level. I'm looking at doing some things with others at the same time. We can have a nice discussion, like a panel discussion. So I'm really looking forward to that. Everything you've brought up today, it just really hits home. And I know our listeners, it'll certainly resonate for them.
Yeah, it's always the most important part that we give them something they can take home. So that's where we know we nailed it.
Yes. So well said. We'll speak again, and we'll catch up. Thank you very much, Erin. Have a great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.